All right, good evening. We're ready to get started. Today we are learning Maseches Bava Kama Nun Vav, Daf Nun Vav, and as well Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. We're starting 5 lines, the first of the long lines on the bottom of Nun Hey Amud Beis, and we're going to be heading to the bottom line of Nun Zayin Amud Aleph. Some fairly famous sugyas in Maseches Bava Kama. Let us jump right in. The Mishnah, the Brisa writes 5 lines from the bottom on Nun Hey Amud Beis. The Brisa writes as follows: Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yeshua Arba Dvarim Ha'osos San Pater Midine Adam Mechai B'Dinei Shamayim. There are 4 activities that if they are done, Bezdin can't hold you accountable. You're not going to be responsible in the eyes of a rabbinical court. However, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not done with you. There will be a degree of culpability and responsibility for the actions that you've done. And then the Gemara gives what seems to be an exhaustive list. Ve'elu hein, here are those 4 things. Haporetz geder bifnei behemas chavero. Let's say that I break your fence, and then subsequently your animal goes out and damages. The halacha is that I'm pater b'dinei bezdin, b'dinei adam, and I'm chai b'dinei shamayim. Next case, ve'akofev kamaso shel chaver bifnei adleika. I take your corn, I fold it over so that it's closer to a fire. It catches fire. Says the Gemara, pater b'dinei adam and chai b'dinei shamayim. Next, ve'asocher edei sheker lehe'id. I hire someone to lie on my behalf. And lastly, b'hayodea edus lechavero. I know edus about you, but ve'eno meidlo, but I don't give that testimony. These are the 4 cases where I'm pater b'dinei adam and chai b'dinei shamayim. You have kind of, in a way, threaded the needle, right? You've kind of skirted the law, but only down here on earth. It's not a good idea to try these things at home, because at the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to even out the justice scales. So the fact that there's no sif in Shulchan Aruch that you violated and you kind of live between the lines, that doesn't make you an er l'chayid. That makes you a little bit of a ramai. We're going to analyze these 4 cases and then see if we can find any more cases that might fit into this category. The Gemara says, where are we? 2 lines from the bottom on Nun Hey Amud Beis. Omar Mar, let's analyze this brisa that we just learned. One of the cases that we said where you're pater b'dinei adam and chai b'dinei shamayim is Omar Mar, haporetz geder b'fnei behemas chaver. If I break the wall to your pen where your animal is, and then your animal gets out and escapes, says the Gemara, hechi dami. Ilema, if you want to say that I, the mazik, went over to you, the Baal Hashor, and I broke your wall, but it was a bikosel bari. It was a perfectly healthy wall. So then, b'dinei adam nami mechayev. I should also be at least held accountable for the wall that I broke. Even if you want to say I'm not responsible for the damages of the shore because of grama b'nizak and putter, I understand. But I cannot be a mazik and damage your kosel bari, your perfectly fine pen that's encasing and holding back your shore. Why would I be pater b'dinei bezdin? I just broke your fence. Ella, says the Gemara, top of Nun Vav Amud Aleph, it must be the kosel ra'ua. The fence that I broke down was a fence that was already supposed to be broken down. It was a disaster. And the house behind me used to have a back porch like this. You could see the raccoons crawling in and out of the siding of the back of their house. Kosel ra'ua. That needed to be broken down. So Ladina, if I break down your wall and your wall already had demolition written all over it, that's why I'm pater b'dinei bezdin and chai b'dinei shamayim. Next case to analyze, top line on Nun Vav Amud Aleph. Amar Mar hakofev kamaso shel chaver b'fnei adleika. If I take your corn and I fold it in such a way that it's now closer to the fire and it catches on fire, our brisa at the bottom of Nun Hey Amud Beis says that you're pater b'dinei adam and chai b'dinei shamayim. Says the Gemara, hechi dami. Ilema demati le beruach mitzuya. If it were to have been the case that the fire would have caught when I folded down your crop, if the fire would have caught in such a case with a ruach mitzuya, then b'dinei adam nami nechayev. I should be held accountable no matter what, because it would have made it even beruach mitzuya. Ella, it must be dematya beruach she'ena mitzuya. It must be that the case we're talking about by kofev kamaso shel chavero is where it only caught fire due to a ruach she'ena mitzuya, a very uncommon wind. Or in regards to this case of hakofev kamaso shel chavero, the Rav Ashi Amar tamun itmar. We're talking about a case where I take a blanket and cover over your bale of hay. Mishum deshavya tamun be'esh, because halachically it has this category of tamun be'esh, because it's now hidden. And therefore, in that case, that's where we have the din of pater b'dinei adam and chayev b'dinei shamayim. And the third case to analyze, Amar Mar, the Brisa writes as follows: Asocher Eidei Sheker. If I hire people to be false witnesses, so then the Brisa said that I'm going to be pater b'dinei adam and chayev b'dinei shamayim. Hechidami. If I hired people to lie on my behalf as Eidim, and due to the lies, I extracted money that is now in my bank account, Mamona by Shlome ubedinei adam name nechayev. I'm just a regular old thief. I created a ruse of Eidim. Of course I have to pay for that. That can't be the case where the Brisa says that you're pater b'dinei adam and chayev b'dinei shamayim. Ella, it must be lechavrei. It must be that I had Eidei Sheker that lied on behalf of a friend. And the last case, if I know edus about my friend and I don't give that testimony, the Brisa there too said that you're pater b'dinei adam and chayev b'dinei shamayim. B'maya skinan ilema b'beitrei. If you're talking about a kas edim where there's two edim, so then pshita deoraisa, who that's obvious that that's a din deoraisa. Im lo yagid v'nasa avono. There we have a pasuk that tells us that you have an onesh, and lechora that's bedine adam. So therefore, you cannot say that if there's two witnesses that you're pater bedine adam and chai bedine shamayim. So therefore, what must it be? Bichad. We're only talking about where there's one aid, and while the one aid is not a din doraisa, but the one aid can, in theory, bring about a shvua from this person to see if he's telling the truth, and that is where we have a case scenario of pater b'dinei adam and chai b'dinei shamayim. So the Gemara so far is clean. We have a brisa with 4 examples of activities where you're going to be exempt down here in Bezdin, but chayiv up there in heaven. The Gemara says, wait 1 second. The Suleka, there's no other cases in Shas, none. There's thousands of pages in Shas. Not one other case where someone skirted Bezdin and they're pater b'dinei adam and chai b'dinei shamayim. And the Gemara just mic drops like 6 or 7 cases. V'ha'ika, and there's a simon here, ha'oseh, v'sam, v'shliach, chavero, and nishbar. Let's go through the cases that also seemingly are pater b'dinei adam and chai b'dinei shamayim. Ha'oseh malacha b'mei chatas u'v'paras chatas. Let's say that I do malacha with the water that's used for purifying impure people, or with the para aduma itself, the paras chatas. You've invalidated them. That's a case scenario where the Brisa writes, and this brisa can be found later in this Masechta, and we saw it in Gittin. And that's case number 1. Here's another. We have another case. If I put poison in front of my friend's animal, there too. That's another case. Case number 2, where we see that I am pater in Bezdin, but chayv up in Shamayim. Here's another case, 1/4 of the way down. If I give a torch, a fire over to a chereshot of a katan, the halacha is pater midine adam v'chai b'dinei shamayim. And again, another case scenario. If I pull a prank on you, I jump out from behind the bushes, you jump up and fall on a fence and get hurt. The halacha there too is pater midine adam v'chai b'dinei shamayim. And 1/3 of the way down, I break a pitcher in a reshus harabim and I don't pick up the shards. Or nafla gimalo, my camel fell below ha'amida and I didn't stand him up. Rav Meir is mechai behezekan, but b'chachamim omrim pater midinei adam v'chai b'dinei shamayim. The Gemara has all of these cases that questions how exhaustive our brisa is. Our brisa says there were 4. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? There are so many cases that are pater midinei adam v'chai b'dinei shamayim. So the Gemara responds, you're absolutely correct. You're right. Miha ika tuva. There are plenty of cases that are pater midinei adam and chai b'dinei shamayim. However, the hani itzrichale, the cases that were mentioned in the brisa at the bottom of Nun Hayamid Beis, we needed all of those cases to be explicitly added. Why? Let's go through them. Ma'u detema b'dinei shamayim nami lo l'chayim. In these 4 cases, I might have thought that you're not just pater from Bezdin, you're pater from Shamayim also. Kamash Malan, that you're not going to be pater from Shamayim. What are the details as to why I thought that perhaps the 4 cases in our brisa would have been pater midinei Shamayim? Let's go through them. Halfway down. If I break the wall to the pen where your animals are, Ma'udetema, I might have thought that because as we were okim earlier, the walls of your pen were a kosel ra'ua, and they were anyways, they had a demolition sign on them. So ma'avid, what did I even do? The animal could have gotten out on his own. It's a kosel ra'ua. So therefore, b'dinei shamayim nami lo lechayev. Perhaps I wouldn't be chayev b'dinei shamayim because the wall that I broke was delemisterei kai anyways. It was meant to be destroyed. Kamash malan, that even though the wall is a kosel ra'ua, I'm still responsible b'dinei shamayim. The next case, hakofev kamaso shel chavero nami. The case of me folding over your corn near a fire. Ma'udetema lema mi hava yadana da'asis ruach she'ena mitzuya. We established the case as a case of ruach she'ena mitzuya. How am I supposed to know when the ruach she'ena mitzuya is going to happen? It's ena mitzuya. If that's true, says the Gemara, perhaps there I should also be completely patur, because after all, what I did not bring about anything direct and barely anything indirect. You're talking about a tornado. I was talking about a 9-mile-an-hour wind on a Tuesday. Cases are not comparable. Kamash malan, that in this case you're also held accountable b'dinei shamayim. And in this case, we also had a differentiation above. We'll speak out the differentiation here as well. Ula Ravashi de Amar Nami Tamun Itmar. Ravashi, you said that this case was talking about where I put a cover on top of your hay and then it burned down. Ma'udetema ana kisuye ksisa nehalach. All I did was cover it. I didn't make it worse. I made it better. Ubedine shamayim nami lo lechayev kamash malan. And I might have thought that because I covered your property, maybe therefore I should be pater af bedine shamayim kamash malan. A couple more cases. V'asocher edei sheker nami, that if I hire people to give false testimony, ma'udetema, I could have argued the following: Lema, I who hired the people could say, Divrei Rab, the Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishomin. You're right. I asked you to do something wrong, but you're a big boy. Don't listen to me. I asked you to do an avera. Don't do it. You have a degree of responsibility. And because I asked you to do something wrong, I'm a bad guy, but you still should have said no. But the fact that you said yes means that you're chayiv and not me. So perhaps perhaps that because I asked you to do something wrong and you were dumb enough to listen to me, so maybe I should be pater b'dinei shamayim and you should be chayiv b'dinei bezdin and b'dinei shamayim. You're a Russia too. Says the Gemara, Kamash Molan, that that's not the case. That I who ask you, yes, I'm pater b'dinei bezdin, but I'm still chayiv b'dinei shamayim. Last case, Vayodea edus lechaver ve'eno meidlo nami. That case as well, where I know edus about you, but I don't know, but I didn't do anything about it. Ma'udetema mi yemar, who says that the chihava asina mishadina le have a modeh? Who says that my edus would have even brought about a conclusion? Maybe I would have gone to Bezdin and I would have said, look, I heard David Merzel did something wrong, and David is makrish, and I changed 0. So because the fact that I held back would be no different in the outcome than saying anything. And therefore, Dilma Hava Mishtabana L'Shikra, maybe David's going to lie and say I did nothing wrong. And therefore, Ubedina Shamayim Nami Lo L'Chayev, because my edus will not bring about a definite admittance of anything wrong on David's part. So therefore, maybe Af Bedina Shamayim, I should not be Chayev. Kamash Mala. So let's summarize. We had a brisa with 4 cases of Dine Shamayim, of a Chiyuv and Dine Shamayim and a Ptur B'Dine Adam. We spoke out the 4 cases and gave Ukimtas. We asked why only those 4. There are so many other cases. And the Gemara says there are more. You're 100% right. But the 4 cases in the brisa needed to be explicitly spoken about because we easily could have misunderstood them. That brings us to the 2 dots, about 15 lines or so from the bottom of the page on Nun Vav Amud Aleph. Let's continue. Nifrit Zabalayla Osher Pitzu Alistim, quoting from our Mishnah at the open of the Perek, the Mishnah on the top of Nun Hey Amud Beis, quoted here saying that if the walls were broken at night, or if the listim broke the walls, Amar Rabba Bihu Shechatzra. Rabba said we're talking about a case where the animal dug its way out. Lachtor in Hebrew is to dig. Aval lo chasra mai. Had the animal not dug, what would have been the din? The Chora says the Gemara chayev. Okay, if the animal doesn't dig and then you take it out, so then in that case you're going to be chayev. The Gemara has a hard time with this. Hey chidami, 2 lines before the wide lines on Nun Vav Amud Aleph. What is the case here? Ilema bekosel bari. If this animal's trapped in a pen with very good strong walls, kilo chasra. If the animal doesn't dig, amai chayev. Not be tied in such a case. I have a Leila Meba. He made a brick wall. The brick wall is still there. The animal didn't take. How can you say that the Bailam are going to be chayiv? Ella says the it's a bad wall. Where is it the animal dug? It's a pshia out of the gates. On my putter, tchilas of the pshia, the sofa ba'onesu. What did you do? You left an animal in a pen with walls that it's a house of cards. You can literally, the animal's going to bump into the that can't be our case either.
There's no audio, Phil. Your audio cut out. I don't know if you can hear me. No audio. Okay.
Whatever. If that's true, says the Gemara, then ma'ikal Meimar, then what then is going to be the then this makes no sense, because then how could you have the case be a case of kosel ra'ua? Because it's a case of kosel ra'ua, and you hold chilasa b'pshia v'sofa ba'ones is chayev, then our Mishnah makes no sense, because our Mishnah says pater. Elamai, the Gemara therefore says, Elamasnisin b'kosel bari ve'afilu lo chasra. Our Mishnah is talking about a case of a healthy wall. Ve'afilu lo chasra, and even if the animal didn't dig. What then was Rabbah talking about? Says the Gemara, itmar de Rabbah, aseifa itmar. We misunderstood Rabbah from the beginning of the Gemara. We thought Rabbah was talking about the Resha. Rabbah was not talking about the Resha. Says the Gemara, itmar de Rabbah, aseifa itmar. What was the case of the Seifa where Rabbah chimed in? Hanicha bechama, if I place an animal in the sun, o shemasra l'chershat v'katam yatzvi zika, or if I gave the animal to a child who's a chereshot v'katan, or to a person who's a chereshot v'katan, the halacha is chayiv. There, Rabbah said, Amar Rabbah v'afidu chasra, even if the animal dug its way out, you'll still be chayiv. And really what was happening, says the Gemara, is a lomi baya. Lomi baya hecha de lo chasra. I don't need to tell you that when there is no chasira, that the animal did not dig its way out, the kula b'pshiyahi, that the person was irresponsible for leaving the animal in the sun, because an animal is going to go crazy in the sun like that. Elafilu chasra nami, even if the animal could dig its way out, I might have thought that maybe it's a case of tchilasa b'pshia b'sofa ba'ones, kamash malan de kula pshiyahi, that when you leave an animal with a kosel ra'ua, so then halacha is that it's considered to be a pshia through and through. My taima, because the reason why you're a poshea was the amar le made the yodas, you already know. The kavan de shavkis abechama. Once you leave this animal out in the sun, kol tatzdika de isle lenevad avda benafka. Any ruse, any hoops it has to jump through to get out of the sun, it's going to get out of the sun. It'll run through a wall, it will jump over a wall, and it will dig under a wall. That brings us to the bottom line of Nun Vavam and Aleph. Let's continue. Hotzia listim chayavim. That if criminals were the ones who took the animal out of the yard and they put it into a place where they could now run amok and go hurt things, that the listim are chayav. Says the Gemara on the top of Nun Vavam and Beis. What is going on here? Pshita, we already know that. Kevan de afkua kaima lavir shusayu l'chol mili. Once the criminals take the animal out of the pen, the criminals are the ones who are held accountable. They're the ones who are entirely responsible. They took the animal out of the pen, obviously. Says the Gemara, Lo tzricha de kamula be'apa. The Gemara gives a nukimta and says, wait, we're not talking about a regular case where they picked up the animal. They opened the gate, and the criminals basically made two sides. They like made a shura of two sides. The animal walked in between them. Nobody ever touched the animal. And then they led the animal to the neighbor's car where the animal gored. They never touched the animal. So maybe they don't really have a din of listim. All they did was guide the animal somewhere without touching it. And kihada amar Rabba amar Rav Masna amar Rav. This was true in another case as well. If I stand your animal on someone else's property, chayev, says the Gemara, mamid pshita. Obviously, if I pick up your animal and then I put it down on your strawberry patch, I'm going to be chayev. You're a mazik, says the Gemara, like we saw earlier. Lo tzricha the kamla ba'apa. We're not talking about a case where any physical contact took place. We're talking about a case where I simply guided the animal by not letting him walk toward me, and then he moved in another direction, and therefore that is not a classical case of listim because he never touched the animal. It was only ba'apa. It was only him standing in front of the animal and kind of steering it without touching it. Therefore, that case needed to be added, and that is why the Gemara quotes this case in our Mishnah. Amar Leah Abai Rav Yosef, in a little bit of a turn of events, he doesn't agree with this. Abai says to his Rabbi Rav Yosef, "He kisha amraslan. You told us that in this case that he didn't just stand there be'apa and guide the animal, but he smacked him with a stick from the right side so he'd go left. The listim nami dehi kishua. Here too there was some type of hitting, and that's a chiddush also because we didn't pick up the animal. He was only hitting the animal, which is not a Maseches. At the 6-7 lines down. Says the Gemara on Nun Bava Mud Beis, Masra la roa nichnas roa, that if I give over my animal to a shepherd to watch over, so then he takes over all of the halachic responsibilities that I would have had. So the Gemara says, that's very nice that you shared that, but Amre tachtav deman. What does it mean that this shepherd now is taking over responsibility? Ilema tachtav de bal behema. If you want to say we're talking about a case of the Baal Behema, so Tanina Chada Zimna, that we already learned once in another brisa, that if I give you my animal, that the din is going to be that you're going to be chayiv if I give you the animal. Why would this be the case? Because the brisa says, and we saw this on Daf Mem Daled, Masro l'shomer chinam u'l'shoel u'l'nosei sachar u'l'socher, that if I give my animal to any of these arba shomrim, kula nichnasu tachas abaylim. We already saw this already on Daf Mem Daled. So why does the Gemara repeat the same din over here, saying that Masra l'roa nichnas haroa? It's the same idea. So the Gemara here therefore changes gears. Ella says the Gemara, Tachtav the shomer kama iftar legamre. Here the Gemara is getting into a sugya called shomer shemasar l'shomer. I am the Baal Ashor, and I give you the animal. You then give the animal to a shepherd. You are the shomer number one. I'm the Baal, you're shomer number one. And then shomer number one gave the animal to shomer number two. Says the Gemara, that's our case. That when our Mishnah says the line of Masra l'roeh, nichnas haroeh, that's not where I, the Baal, gave the animal to a shomer. That we already established on Daf Mem Daled. But rather, it's where I give you, shomer number one, the animal, and you, shomer number one, give the animal to a third party. There, we have a din that you're chayev. Says the Gemara, elatachtav de shomer, lema, perhaps the Gemara says 4 lines before the wide lines on Nun Bava Mud Beis. Maybe we should say, perhaps tabit tiyufta de Rava, to Omar Rava, shomer shemasar l'shomer chayev. That if a shomer gives it to the second shomer, then even the first shomer is chayev. That's not what we just said. We said that the second shomer is chayev, not the first one. Amar lach Rava, my masra l'roeh. We're dealing with a bit of a different case over here. We're dealing with le barzile. A barzile in Aramaic is like an apprentice of some kind. Take a look at Rashi, 8 lines or so from the bottom of the page. Le barzile. Rashi says le talmido. So I think about this a lot. When I trained as a moel, so I was an apprentice. The person training me would say, Phil, do the hafrada. Phil, do the tfisa. Phil, put on the shield. Whatever the stage is, where I had to learn each step one at a time. I was the barzile. So here, what would happen if I'm the roeh and I give it over to my talmid? So there's a shtickle chiddush there. Is he just an extension of my hand, or does he have his own achrayas? So here, the Gemara says that according to Rava, it's the barzile, and Rava therefore says that shomer shemasar the shomer is chayev. To orche de roa lemimsar lebarzile. That's a normal thing to do. Ika de Amre, first of the long lines, that really there's a slightly different version of this discussion. Midikatani masra leroe v'loktani masra leacher, because the Brisa speaks specifically about giving it over to a roe, to a shepherd, and not to somebody else. Mamina my masra leroe, masra roe lebarzile. So the Gemara says just another version, quite similar to the previous one, that he gave it over to his Talmud. The urche de roe lemimsar lebarzile. That's normal. Aval la'acher lo. But only to a barzile would that din be true, but it wouldn't extend to anybody else. And lema misayeh le Rabba. Perhaps this helps Rava. Tamar Rava shomer shemasr l'shomer chayev. Says the Gemara lo. That's not correct. Amri lo. You cannot say that because dilma orcha de milsak tani b'huadin la'acher. Maybe the reason why it said roeh representing a barzile was because that was what was common. But maybe the din would be the same to somebody else. We don't know. You can't infer that from here. Okay, that brings us to a new sugya. This sugya is actually found in Bava Metzia. It's about Hashavas Aveda. And Hashavas Aveda dinim are found throughout Shas, but their concentration is in the next Masechta we're going to be learning in not too far away. We're just about halfway through this Masechta, so another 63 days or so, and then we'll be moving on to Bava Metzia. But here's a Bava Metzia sugya a little early. Says the Gemara, Itmar, Shomer Aveda, during the period of time that I am watching a lost item, what is my halachic status of watching that item? That's a machlokas amoraim. Rabba Amar kishomer chinam dami. Rav Yosef Amar kishomer sachar dami. Rabba says that I'm like a shomer chinam dami. Rabba Amar kishomer chinam dami because my hana kamati le, I get nothing out of the deal. A shomer sachar gets money. When I'm watching your item, I get nothing. So therefore, perhaps I should be a shomer chinam. Rav Yosef Amar, 4 lines from the bottom, that really it's kishomer sachar dami. Why is that? Because because while I'm being osek in the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, of doing shmira on the Hashavas Aveda, I'm pater from other mitzvos. And therefore, if somebody knocks on the door and says, Chnosas Kala, whatever, Rifta La'anya, give me some bread, Ladina, I'm pater from giving them anything. Because osek b'mitzvah is pater min mitzvah. Take a look at Rashi. 4 lines from the bottom. That when you're watching an Aveda, for Hashavas Aveda, you're pater from giving out the tzedakah to poor people. Me, like we saw a few hundred blot ago. I don't even know, maybe 1,000 blot ago, a long time ago. I don't know when that was. It was a long time ago. So the Gemara says that really you do earn something when you are watching an Aveda. What you earn is that you're osek b'mitzvah, pater mina mitzvah, and you don't have to give bread to a poor person when they knock on the door because osek b'mitzvah, pater mina mitzvah. Ika de mifreshe, some say things are a little bit different. Ika de mifreshe hachi, some say that Rav Yosef's taich was a little different. 2 lines from the bottom, nun vavam beis. Amar, that Rav Yosef Amar kishomer sachar dami, why? Keva de rachmana she'abde bal korche, since you don't have a choice but to be a shomer for that item, therefore, because the Torah forces you to watch it, hilkach kishomer sachar dami. Very good. These are the shitas. Let's review the question, and then we're going to ask 6 shilas on our sugya. 4 of them today, actually. I find a lost item. I find an iPad. I don't know whose it is. I looked in the iCloud. I have no idea whose it is. There are some simanim. And halachically, I have the mitzvah d'oraisa of Hashavas Aveda. And it takes me 2 weeks to find that person. Hachraza, I put the signs up on the board, whatever. And during those 2 weeks, stuff happens to that iPad. Am I like a shomer chinam, who has the lowest level of burden of responsibility during that time? Or am I like a shomer sachar, who really has a greater responsibility? One of the great nafkaminas is gneva ve'aveda. If an item gets stolen or lost while I'm watching it, so if I'm a shomer chinam, I'm pater when that happens. If someone breaks into my house, they say, oh, look, great, an iPad, and they steal it, never to be found again. Huge nafkamina. If I'm a shomer chinam, on your aveda, I'm pater. If I'm a shomer sachar, chayiv. So, machlokas hamoraim. Rabba says you're like a shomer chinam. Rav Yosef says you're like a shomer sachar. So now let's ask some questions and try to poke some holes in these shitas. Last line of Nun Vavam Mid Beis, turning to the top of Nun Zayin Mid Aleph. Eisvei Rab Yosef le Rabba. Rav Yosef asks a kasha on Rabba. Let's remember, Rabba said shomer chinam. that during the time of watching an Aveda, you are a Shomer Chinam. Top of Nun Zayin Amar Aleph, the din is like this. The Brisa writes it in a Tosefta and Bava Metzia. If I return an item to a place where it can be seen by the owner, you don't have to deal with it anymore. Seemingly, you have discharged your responsibilities as it relates to this item. Nigniva o avda, if it was then stolen or lost, so then chayiv ba'achrayusa. What type of shomer is that representative of? Shomer sachar, because you're chayiv ba'achrayusa for gneva ve'aveda. That's a typical classical nafkamina between the two. So then my nigniva o avda, lav nigniva mi beso ve'avda mi beso. Doesn't that mean that it was stolen from his house? And therefore, because I was watching it in my house, so therefore I'm going to be chayiv. I must be, therefore I'm a shomer sachar. Says the Gemara, lo, it's absolutely not correct. Why not? Because mi makom shechzira. It was in a different place. It was in a location that was near the house. What? Yeah, the case is, it's crystal clear. It's a great question against Rabbah. Rabbah started out, oh, shomer chinam, because you're not getting any money. What do you mean shomer chinam? The Brisa says, Gneva v'aveda yer chayav b'achrayusa. Says the Gemara, no, it's mimakom shechzira, to the place that you brought it back to. Asks the Gemara, wait 1 second. The Brisa said that when you put it b'makom shechzira v'aktani, eino chayav l'tapel ba. If I put it b'makom shechzira, I put it on your porch, let's say. The Brisa says eino chayav l'tapel ba, but it also says you're chayav b'achrayusa. That's a stira. You can't say that I have no more achrayus. But if it gets stolen from there, I'm chayiv b'achrayusa. Meichatesi. The Gemara says, Amar Le, you're right. This Brisa is quite complicated, and the words are all missing, completely missing. Amar Le hacha b'mayaskinan. Really, what are we talking about? Yes, I put it on your porch, but when did I put it on your porch? It depends. Says the Gemara, Kigon sheichzira b'tzoharayim. If I put it on your porch in the afternoon, it's different than putting it on your porch in the morning. Let's go through the cases. The Tartek Tani, really, this Brisa, the Tosefta, I should say, from Bava Metzia, is teaching me two cases. The Hachik Tani, here is Pshat in the Brisa. Hechzira shachris l'makum she'yer ena. I get up early, I take your item, I know it's yours, I go to your porch, 6 a.m. bright and early. I take your iPad, I put it in one of the thousands of Target bags that I have in my house, and I put it between your screen door, and you're done. Makom she'yer ena. Ushchiach, it's common to ayil v'nafik v'chazilei. People go in their house all the time in the mornings. Like regularly, I go in my car. I usually have forgotten something. I go back in my house and get to whatever I forgot and come back out. I'm inside, and then I come home an hour later for carpool. I'm in my house all the time. Pashut that in the morning, makom she'yer ena. That's when we say lo yatapel, that I've discharged my responsibilities. I'm good, no problem. And there, eino chayav l'tapel ba. But if while you're at work downtown at noon, you're not coming home for 6 hours, I take your iPad, I put it in the Target bag, I open your screen door, I put it away, no one can see it, I close the door. Shalom al Yisrael? No, not Shalom al Yisrael. There, nobody's in and out of their house at noon. I happen to work from home, so I am. But people who have normal jobs, they're in an office somewhere and they're not at home. So in that case, there the Bailam won't see it, then you're still on the hook. The Nignevo Avda, Chai Bachrayusa. Kaftor Vaferach, a beautiful Brisa, but we had no clue what was going on in the Tosefta because we were missing half of the information. The difference between putting something on the porch in the Tzoharayim versus the morning. Lemaisa, no more of a kasha from here anymore. Let's move on to question number 2, 12 lines down. Esvei, another Brisa. This Brisa can be found in a Tosefta as well in Bava Metzia. Le'olam u'chayev ad she'achzirenu l'yirshuso. The halacha is that you're chayev until you put it back in a person's property. My le'olam, why did it say you're forever responsible? Le'olam, says the Gemara, a quarter of the way down, lava filu mi beso. Yes, lava filu mi beso. Does that mean even if I put it into your house, shmami no, a very high level of shmira, I can't leave it on the porch. I have to make sure it's in your house. Therefore, mashma kishomer sachar dami. Kasha again on Rabbah. Says the Gemara, Amar Le, I taka agree with you by animals. Modina lach ba'alei chayim. I agree with animals that you're right, that I would have to be acting like a shomer sachar. Why? Because the animal has already walked around outside. Rashi explains the word nigra is psios, and briasa means outside. So the Gemara says that because this animal is used to walking around the community, I am maskim that when we're dealing with an animal, you're 100% right, shomer sachar. What I disagree with is inanimate objects. The iPad. There, you don't need an extra level of shmira. That Bryce is only talking about animals. But regular lost items, in our era, we have lost dogs. That's the only animate objects that we lose. We don't lose cows, right? I've done brissim on farms. You've lost a cow? Is that true? I did a circumcision for a family in Hampshire, Illinois. Goyim Doraisa Mamish. I didn't lose the baby. What is wrong with you? So they had 13 horses in the back stables, and they actually could lose an animal. We live here. There's no horses here. So, but that's why this Bryce is not a kasha and Rabba. Rabba agrees. By Bailim, it's Shmir Yaserta. Absolutely. So let's move on to the next question. A third of the way down, the Bryce that says, Eisvei Rabba le Rav Yosef, turning the tables. Now we're asking on Rav Yosef, who holds that when you're watching an Aveda, that you are a Shomer Sachar. It says the Gemara, quoting a Brisa, the pasuk says, Hashev Teshivim, Hashev Ainli Ela Beveso. I only know about a higher level of Shmira that I have to put the item that I'm watching back in the home of the actual owner. Liginaso ulechurvaso minayim. The fact that I'm allowed to put it in a garden or in some type of field that belongs to you, how do I know that's allowed? Talmud Lomar Teshivim Mikol Makom. That's a lower level of Shmira, Kasha and Rav Yosef. Says the Gemara, wait, my liginasu ulecharvaso. What are we talking about? These gardens, these porticos, what are we talking about? If it's inside of a fence, if it's protected, Ainu Beso, then there's no nafkamina between that and the house. Elapshita, halfway down on Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, says the Gemara. Elapshita says the Gemara, liginaso she'eni mishtameres, ulecharvaso she'eni mishtameres. I put the iPad in a field that doesn't have a great level of protection. It's not fenced in. Therefore, we see that I'm allowed to put them in that space. You wanted to say that maybe Rav Yosef, you hold Shomer Sachar. How can you do that? The Brisa says it's Shomer Chinam. Famole. Amar Le, what would Rav Yosef respond? Le'olam leginasa mishtameres ulechorbasa mishtameres. No, I disagree. The Brisa is talking about a case where it's completely encased. And you're right. There's no difference between the field that I left the iPad and your living room inside your house. Okay, well then what's the chiddush of the Mishnah? If the garden in which I put, it's like some houses have these very tall, fancy black painted fences with like spears on the top of them. If I put my iPad in your front yard, that's kibeso. That's like your house. But then I don't need a brisa for that. So why did the brisa teach me this case? Says the Gemara, kamash malan, a different din. The lo ba'inan das bailin. If it's your item and I find your item and I put it into your chatzar mishtameres, done. I am putter. I don't even need to tell you. You can come home and be surprised. Somebody found my iPad. Wonderful. How do we know? What? If it's mishtameres, we have to define mishtameres, right? So my mailbox opens and closes at the top. It does have a key that I don't use or have anymore. So that's not mishtameres anymore. But some people have a mailbox that when you slide in the mail, no one gets it out without a key. That's mishtameres. That's for sure mishtameres. So says the Gemara, what's the chiddush of the Brisa? That I don't need the Bailim to know. So then what's the case? Kid the Rabbi Lazar. Damar Rabbi Lazar, here's the din. Hakol tzrichin das Bailim. In general, when there are transactions between me and you need to know, you need to be a part of the transaction. Right? If you and I are doing a transaction, you can't not know that I sold something to you. That's not normal. There's one exception to the rule. Chutz me'ashavas aveda. By ashavas aveda, there's no din of das bailim. That was the chiddush of the Brisa to say, even in the gina mishtameres, not because of shomer chin and shomer sachar, but to make sure that you know that I don't need das bailim. Shahare ribsa Torah hashavos harbe, because the Torah used the word hashev to shiveim, multiple uses of the word, and therefore no kasha against Rav Yosef, because the Brisa was talking about something totally different. Not about Shomer Chinam and Shomer Sachar, but rather about Tzrichin Das Bailim. And the last kasha for the night, and with this we'll stop. this last sugya needs about 3 or 4 weeks to really unpack, but I'm going to give it about 3 or 4 minutes because we got Marv soon, a condensation. So we'll figure out as much as we can. Amar le Abai Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef held that someone who's watching an Aved does kishomer sachar. Now we're going to have a kasha on him again. Ve'at lo tizbara. Rav Yosef, you don't hold the shomer Aved kishomer chinam dami? How can you not hold that when I'm watching an item that I'm like a shomer chinam? After all, Amar Rav Chia bar Abba Amar Rav Yochanan. Hatoin tainas ganav be'aveda. If I am watching an item and I say tainas ganav, somebody stole the item from me, mishalem tashlume kefel. The din is that I have to pay kefel if I'm then caught to be the criminal. If you want to say that really I, the shomer, am a shomer sachar, why would I ever make a claim of being stolen? What is the din of a shomer sachar when something is stolen? The din is that you're on the hook. You're a shomer sachar. So if the din of a shomer sachar is that you're on the hook for gneva ve'aveda, and I'm watching the item, why does it help me to say that it was stolen? If I'm a shomer sachar, I'm chayiv anyways. So therefore, I wouldn't pay tashlume kefel in that case. The opposite. Karna b'yishlume, I have to pay the actual cost of the item. And we'll discuss this to get length in Maseches Bava Mithia. Amar le, therefore, there's a kasha. V'haraya must beautifully show that it must be a din of a shomer chinam, Rav Yosef. It must be that Rab is right and you're wrong. Amar le hacha b'mayaskinan. No, the claim in the brisa wasn't toin tainas ganav, but rather kigon shetoin tainas listim mizuyin. We were talking about a case where I was forced by bandits who were brandishing weapons. They were dangerous people. That's not, even a shomer sachar is going to be pater. That's an ones. That's totally different. Because you show up with a gun. Can I have your wallet? Yes, you can. Is the wallet yours? Doesn't matter. You take the wallet. I don't want to get hurt. That's an ones. And therefore, no raya about shomer chinam shomer sachar, because we're not talking about tainas ganav. We're talking about tainas listim mizuyin. Amarle says the Gemara, listim mizuyin gazlan hu. Listim mizuyin is a different din altogether because they are considered a gazlan, which has no din of kefil anyways. That can't be our brisa. Says the Gemara, last line of the day. Amarle shani omer listim mizuyim kevan demintar meinshi ganav. He says, I disagree. The taina of listim mizuyin, why is he carrying that weapon? Because there's a certain trepidation, a certain fear. He doesn't feel comfortable without it. Therefore, he's not a gazlan, he's a ganav. Therefore, it is mishal tashlume kefel. And therefore, we have an answer to Rav Yosef's question. We'll stop right here and pick up with the last word on Nun Zayin Amud Aleph on Shabbos. Wishing you all a beautiful night.